Okay, I think we'll just get started and go through it. Hello, my name is Zion Brigham. I'm a TAP at Chico State University Center Regenerative Ag and Resilient Systems. I'm joined today by Ted Gailey. We are the TAs for the Butte County Farm Bureau's 2024 HSP grant. Today we're going to be talking about and looking over the cover crop establishments overview and guidelines on it. Can I just remind everyone if you can mute your mics just so there's no echo, this will be recorded. Perfect. Okay. Just starting it off with a little project overview. If you're not familiar with the HSP project incentive, it was brought by CDFA and it was a block grant. So Butte County Farm Bureau is the one managing the grant. The award was for $4 million. Accepted counties were Butte, Glenn, and Tehama. So the three organizations you might want to be familiar with is Butte County, CDFA, and then Chico State Center Regen Ag and Resilient Systems. I have a lot of QR codes throughout this presentation that give some cool links to articles, to information, or different pages that CDFA offers for cover crops. This is just a little slide to show you how to utilize it. If you have an attachment or QR, you have this. You can also use your camera and just hold it up to the screen whenever a QR code pops up. For today's agenda, we'll be looking at a number of things related to cover crops and their implementation and the requirements for CDFA, as well as some general information just talking about benefits of cover crops and multi-species. Starting it off, we're going to look at some of just the overall benefits of cover crops, what you might see with your initial plantings. These will be pretty categorical for all operation types from cropland, orchards, and rangeland. The first we look at is soil health improvement, so erosion control and soil structure, nutrient cycling. These are all beneficial aspects that should come from your cover crop mix. Next is weed suppression, acting as a natural mulch and some allelopathic effects. So that's going to be some of your mustards and different biochemical that release natural chemicals that inhibit weed seed germination. Super helpful if you're trying to keep those orchards cleaned later on. We do have some information on pest and disease management, provides habitat for beneficial insects and predators, and disease suppression. Certain cover crops are known to break up some disease cycles in operations that you might be having a problem with. That's kind of nice. Water management, we have some moisture retention and infiltration improvements. So keeping that nice green mat, allowing those winter rains if you're doing a cool season cover crop, really maximizing the amount of water that you can retain in your soil. And then there is some economic benefits that people have seen, reduced input cost. You don't have to use fertilizer as much. Some of your cover crops can be acting as a green manure. You have long-term productivity, just enhancing your soil health, seeing later on improvements to yield and output. I'm going to go in a little bit about the types of cover crops after that general example. The NRCS and USDA has this general definition. This is some of the cover crops that a lot of people would use. Again, as you can see up in the top left, you have your category of grasses. You have these legumes, you have these broadleaves. As you can see, some legumes can be broadleaves, but not all broadleaves are legumes. Very similar to a periodic table, in my opinion. If I go to the next slide, you'll see if you want to look more into the individual cover crops, what their pros and cons are, plantings, anything like that, this QR code will take you to a NRCS document that will have a ton of information on the individual cover crops and what they provide. If we look at some legume cover crops or leguminous, these are nitrogen fixing cover crops. The legume family can form a symbiotic relationship with nitrogen fixing bacteria, converting atmospheric nitrogen into a form usable for plants. So again, we have those benefits of nitrogen fixation. We also have improving soil health with organic matter and soil structure and weed suppression. As you can see, some of this vetch really taking over, suppressing the weed population down. You're going to see some examples of this, some normal cover crop mixes, soybeans, lentils, field peas, faba beans, hairy vetch, crimson clover. And then I have that QR code that just brings a little more information about the legumes and what they provide. Next, a lot of people are going to have grasses. These are mainly to suppress weeds and enhance some soil structure. They do a great job with their advanced root systems. They have erosion control, weed suppression, and soil structure. That strong root really preventing soil erosion. You're not going to have the rains be taking away your topsoil or anything like that. Some great examples of that would be rye, barley, oats, annual grasses, and etc. Again, that QR code takes some information about grasses. And finally, out of the three categories, we have the brassica. Brassica cover crops are plants from the Brassicaceae family, known for their deep taproot, biofumigation properties, and ability to scavenge nutrients. So these are going to be the ones that break up compaction. You might be running a mustard or different that has that biofumigation properties. Really nice. We recommend always mixing the three together, and I'll get a little more into the next slide. Soil health, deep root, pest and disease management, and nutrient scavenging. Again, there's a QR code for it if you want more information. We recommend utilizing a multi-species cover crop, not doing a mono-species, so one type. A lot of times with the research and the articles, it's always better to do with 8. After 8, you start seeing a drop off, but 2-8, you see benefits adding each type of cover crop. So these are some of the benefits you can see when utilizing multi-species. Enhanced soil health promotes a healthier soil ecosystem with biodiversity. Soil structure improves water infiltration. A lot of these you'd see on those previous slides, but now you're mixing it and getting some of the benefits from each one of those categories. I also like to look at the ecosystem services. You're providing habitat for pollinators, more carbon sequestering, and more weed suppression because you're having those multi-layers. If you think about how the different cover crops grow, where you're kind of building and building and having multi-layers from the ground soil. Benefits you can see with 8 more species, maximizing plant interactions, the synergy, resilience. They're better at able to withstand environmental stresses. So you say one species doesn't take off, or even 3, you had 8, so you still have those others able to take its place and still get to that 60% coverage with that increased biomass. And if you're interested in learning more about what multi-species can do and some of the benefits, I have 2 great articles from the Cambridge University on cover crop management, as well as SARE on why 8 or more cover crop species are better, really seeing that drop off after 8 or the kind of that plateauing. But until 8, you're seeing a nice incline of the benefits that they were capturing. General planning procedures when it comes to cover crops. We do recommend if it's doing a cool season cover crop, your ideal planning is right before the rains when the soil temperatures are still warm, typically October to November. However, each grower knows their field the best. Operations and climate conditions might adjust the planning timeline. Really, if you understand your project, your operation, go for it. If you need any help kind of deciding when the best time, we recommend to reach out to TAPs, just myself or Ted. We can kind of walk you through or help you in any aspect of that you need. Seed preparation steps after you buy your seed from your seed provider. What you need to do, cleaning the equipment, getting rid of any previous seed from hopper plates or hoses, making sure there's nothing molding or anything like that. Thoroughly mixing your seed and then adding those inoculants, usually with the legume mixes, making sure a lot of times they're already be mixed if you're buying it from some seed distributors, but sometimes you'll buy it on the side and have to mix it yourself. That kind of gets in the point of sourcing your cover crops. The CDFA has a great directory of registered seed sellers. This isn't the only place you have to use, but it's a great place to get started. And I list some of Chico locations, so Chico and Butte, that you might find helpful. Recommend verifying those eligible species. I'll be getting in more on the replant tool and the species you selected, seed mix considerations, making sure you're hitting all aspects. Just make sure you're buying from reputable suppliers. Sometimes they're purchasing in bulk, it can help. And then keeping records. So maintain invoices and seed tags for all purchases of compliance. So this will get more into the verification requirements, but it's good to document all interactions with your seed provider and keeping a good housekeeping of that. So as I talked about on your replan tool, you're going to have your species selected already going forward with this. If you want to change it or anything, that is something that you can reach out to Butte County Farm Bureau and talk about if it'd be beneficial for you. So here's some examples. We have the project implementation work plan. It's going to be on your first pages. It shows the system type, what practice you're doing, what payment scenario, what field, the acres, timeline, and soil sampling and everything further. If you pair this with the map that goes along with that field, you'll see that, okay, we got the cover crop, adding a legume mix, and this is the area that we are adding it. Very important to stay in those defined areas that you selected in the replant tool. And if I come down to the bottom right here, we can see those species to be planted. This is not a great example with only two species mixes, but you kind of get the idea. You'll see what species you selected, what you need to buy and plant moving forward. So if we go into implementation requirements, I'm going to start with this photo right here. And there's two really big ways to get your seed on the ground. That is going to be drilled versus broadcast. And you see the difference comparatively. Drilled, you're going to get more unified cover crop disbursement, where broadcast is a little more patchy. You'll still get there in the end, but you can definitely see the improvements with drilled. It's also important to know if you are doing drilled versus broadcast. Um, Drilled might require 30 pounds an acre, and then broadcast might jump up all the way to 90 pounds an acre on the same seed mix. Broadcast will take quite a bit more seed to get the same or less than results. However, it is a lot cheaper with equipment costs and things like that. So there's some general requirements and guidelines from the replan and CDFA guidelines. We need to ensure the compliance with the specific requirements that you select in that payment scenario, as I showed off on that replan tool. So if you have multi-species, single species, making sure you're not jumping. If you had a multi-species to single species, it'd be more an issue than you jumping from single to multi. During practice implementation, you cannot plant this cover crop with a fertilizer. CDFA guidelines say it has to be without. We have to allow the cover crop to grow to produce as much biomass as possible, usually recommending about 50% bloom on that. And then cover crop biomass slash residue should not be removed from the field to another location, making sure that biomass is going into the soil, really driving the point of this Healthy Soils program. I have some information on planting procedures and planting procedures, making sure that importance of seed to soil contact for that successful germination. Some of the steps you can take is weed control, pre-irrigation. That's going to be more if you're doing a warm season cover crop in the spring or summer. And in California, usually the cool season cover crops are only getting their water needs met by rain, so you really don't have to worry about that. Tillage preparation, if you decide you need to till to get your cover crop down because you have too much weed pressure or anything like that. This is all things that you're going to do before. If you're doing a no-till approach, mowing down any existing vegetation to allow adequate seed to soil contact. And then have just a little more on that. There's an article on the bottom left if you're interested. As we talked prior about seed drills being expensive, or if you didn't want to do that, to go ahead and buy it, I did list some seed drill providers. Everyone but Kellogg Ag Service is a service, so they'll come out, plant your cover crop, and take care of it for you. Kellogg is a rental. They're great too. Um, yeah, I'll pause here just for a sec if you wanted to take a picture or anything like that to look up these seed drill suppliers. Okay. So going on to verification requirements for your HSP CDFA project. So verification comes in three forms really for cover crops. We're going to have those 3 to 5 geotagged photos showing established cover crops in the field. We're looking at a 60% or more coverage in the field. Um, Again, taking those best photos you can, taking those high population areas. However, make sure this is a geotagged photo that you're spreading out, not just taking it on the west side of your field, really trying to get but you can play with the angles, make it look as full and flush as possible. Keeping those receipts, as I mentioned prior, from your seed distributor, making sure you have all your seeding rates and things like that, as well as your cover crop details. Keeping just a little log or an Excel file or a document just with your species names and their seeding rates that you provided, as you see in that example. I'm going to jump into a little bit how to take those geotagged photos. If you were here the following weeks, you've probably already seen Ted Gailey go through it. This is just a little more detail and information that can help you. So if you have an iPhone, this is how to enable location services in the settings on your iPhone. This one has one little YouTube video about taking photos, as well as CDFA instructions on it. Again, if you're having problems with this, no need to stress. Just reach out to the TAPs and we'll help you kind of go through this process and get it all going. If you have an Android, these are the instructions for you and a YouTube video going into that. In that bottom right here, where it says using a geotagged phone application, this is what CDFA and Butte County Farm Bureau recommend to utilize. It's an app that CDFA has kind of sponsored in a way that they really quite like to utilize. Here is the app. I have some great information. There's little how-to videos that the GPS map camera geotech photos set up, just talking about how to go through that process of taking the photos. Super easy. It's a point click, and you can see kind of the bottom here. It pops up with a map, GPS location of where it is. If you wanted to, you can even add what time of day, weather concerns, anything like that. Super nice, super helpful. I think it'd be the easiest way for any grower to hop on it. And again, I have the link to the video and a link to the app on the screen too. So once you take your geotag photos or your receipts or your cover crop documentation, where you're going to go. So you should receive a link to a SharePoint file emailed from Butte County Farm Bureau, and hopefully the coming weeks. Within the SharePoint file, it's going to have a system of file hierarchies, meaning which is basically going to be files within inside files. You'll see a file with your contract number and your name. It might be just your last name, but I believe it's going to be your name. And then you'll see these drop downs with year 1, year 2, year 3 for cover crop at least. Within these, you're going to see one with photos, receipts, soil test, and reimbursement. Then you say, I need to upload my photos. I'm going to select photos, and then I'm going to select practices. This is going to be practice 1. If you have multiple practices, such as a cover crop and a compost, you would have 2 files here with practices labeled. And then you're just going to open that and upload those files into it. Super easy. Super easy to go through. If you have any questions, again, just reach out. For questions regarding SharePoint file access or anything like that, please reach out to Butte County Farm Bureau, Danielle, or Colleen. They can kind of help you with that process. Perfect. And then just guidelines for effective photos. I just added this as I've taken some in the past. As you can see, you must stay within your APN boundaries. On that replan tool, you'd see those red boxes where I've outlined. Those are your APNs. You are required to have your geo-tagged location within inside those APN boundaries. If you have any questions on that, please call. Capturing key areas, 3 to 5 photos. Frame your shots to show 60% coverage of that cover crop, making sure it's looking nice. Tap to focus, things like that. And then I just have a quick little tip down here of making sure, usually taking it in morning, midday is decent. I don't recommend the afternoon because it starts throwing a lot of shadows. Making sure if you can put your shadow behind you or the light behind you, it really helps. Cover crop termination, CDFA doesn't really have any guidelines on how we do it. These are just some things we recommend. It is required to get that high or a full biomass for this project. That optional termination is usually about 50% bloom of your cover crop. However, you might decide after that when you want to. So you have an earlier termination, later termination. And that really just depends on your operation and what your requirements are. There are a number of ways you can terminate with spraying herbicide, mowing to a minimum height, rolling or tilling, just to name a few. If I go to the next slide, here are some of our highlighted ones with the flow mower and rolling crimping. These are some we like to see just because it's not utilizing any more herbicide to kill it off or anything like that, and really puts a lot of biomass into the soil. You have some description, some benefits with minimized soil disturbance, provides weed suppression, moisture retention, creating mulch for the soil. Yeah. And then if you had any more questions or want to learn more information about cover crops and their purpose throughout agriculture and moving to more regenerative ag systems, I did provide this QR code, which just takes you over to the Center of Regen Agriculture and Resilient Systems um, cover cropping page, which has some great resources as well as any information regarding that. And I thank you guys for attending. If you have any questions, we'll begin it now. I also have Ted, myself, and Lindsay's contact info if there's anything that pops up after that you might have questions about.
I'm going to drop a link to the YouTube page in the chat here for anybody interested in viewing this video after we post it. It should be online by 11 o'clock today.
Thanks, Diane. That was great.
Yeah, again, if you have any questions that come up later, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to kind of walk you through or talk to you about any of these problems or concerns you may have.
No questions. You did a great job, Zion.
No, thanks.
Yeah. Thinking we don't have any I'm gonna stop the recording. Yeah.
Yeah.